Today's episode of the 1% Podcast, we have Rob Morris joining us. Rob is a Super Bowl champion, former Indianapolis Colts, played with Peyton Manning, played for Tony Dungy, former BYU Cougar, and Nampa Bulldog, grew up here in the Treasure Valley. Rob was one of the most highly recruited players ever to come out of Idaho and has an amazing story about his journey as an NFL football player, overcoming adversity and injuries, difficulty, hardship, winning a Super Bowl, and then all the things that have come after that for him in his life. And so we're excited to have Rob on the podcast today to talk about overcoming those things and some of the successes and trials that he's had along the way.
The most important thing was relationships. And, you can win football games by having good relationships. You can win in business by developing good relationships. But the best of the best, those are the guys that combine the two, the hard work, the preparation, the knowledge of the game, understanding the concepts, along with their physical skills. Resilience is about finding a way. It's not always about the most talent or the most grit or determination. It's about figuring out, ways to win.
Rob Morris, welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you today.
Thanks, Cam. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this will be awesome. So Rob is a native of the Treasure Valley, grew up in Nampa, Idaho, went to Nampa High School, All-American high school football player, getting recruited to a lot of different schools. Talk to us about life growing up, your family dynamic, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, what all that looked like, and then let's kind of transition into like that high school piece. And, I think that you probably had a unique situation where being such a, heavily sought after recruit and all that kind of stuff. So talk to us about that if you would.
Yeah, it was interesting. I came from definitely a football family.
Okay.
Obviously I have 3 brothers and a sister, and my dad was a diehard football guy.
Okay.
My older sister and my mom, it was kind of like we had, they were always sort of taking care of us.
Okay.
We were just grinding in the football. My dad ran the local youth football program. He coached us all the time. So from a really early age, I always had access to like the equipment. So other kids were out sort of playing in the playgrounds. We had like full gear on around, just bashing heads.
Yeah. So where do you fall at in your family? So you said you have a sister's the oldest?
Middle of 5, yeah. Sister, brother, and then me, and then 2 little brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So your dad was all into the football thing from an early age. What was kind of the impetus of that with him? Had your dad just loved football, or had he?
I think so. I think maybe that was his dream, and he just didn't quite make it. He was a little too small.
Okay.
And he went off to Vietnam and came back and just, I think, embraced that with his boys, and he just loved the sport so much. I mean, we didn't have social media and computers and phones. I just remember watching these, VHS tapes of the NFL Crunch Course.
Oh yeah.
All these old. So I grew up like on Sam Huff and all these Dick Butkus and all these old school guys, and that's just kind of how I learned about football. It's sort of the hard knocks, and I was sort of obsessed with it from a young age.
No, I love it. So did you play other sports growing up as well, or only football?
Yeah, no, we did everything.
Okay.
We played baseball, and we ran track and played basketball, and I wasn't great at any of those. Baseball, I was okay. I'd either hit a home run or strike out. There was like no in between.
Okay.
But football was kind of the thing that I latched onto super early on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to Nampa High School, start gaining a lot of accolades. Like what did your high school experience look like back then? Because back then freshmen weren't in the high schools, so there was probably a junior high. So then you get into high school. What did that look like? Were you like instantly kind of a star from the beginning, or was that? Did that kind of? Did you have to?
Yeah, I don't know how do I say that without sounding like illegal.
No. It was just real.
I
Okay.
think I was just natural with football, and it was funny because when I was in 2nd grade, my dad was the coach of my brother's 5th grade team, so we snuck me on.
Okay.
And even in 2nd grade, I was over the ball carrying weight limit, so I was the starting nose tackle.
Okay.
And eventually they found out I wasn't of age, and I got booted off, which I was just like, this is my dream. My dream is over.
Yeah.
But in high school, I loved the sport. It was kind of an obsession to me. And I think I was pretty good, pretty quick. And we always had pretty good teams. I think the first organized football game I lost was my junior year.
Oh.
We lost 2-0 to Bora.
Wow.
Yeah. And, Napa didn't have like a great football program. And I think we kind of started to build that.
Yeah. Because what year did you graduate?
93.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like Corey Wilson-Hume and John Stan Ross, were they all like around your same age?
Brothers were a year above.
Okay.
Corey Wilson-Hume and Sean Turner went and played at Utah State and played in the NFL a little bit.
Yeah.
So we had some talent.
For sure.
Yeah.
Willie Alderson was a couple years later, I think.
He was behind me, yeah. Yes, with my little brother.
Okay. Yeah. So you guys had some amazing teams, right? Like obviously putting a lot of guys into BYU or other D1 schools.
We had a handful of guys. It feels like now there's more guys, way more guys coming out of Idaho. I mean, when I think when things have changed, there was one high school in Nampa when I was there. Yeah. And then you had the Boise schools, but Jake Plummer was my year. So we had a handful of dudes that made it.
Yeah.
Had pretty good career.
Yeah. So what did that recruiting process look like? You start getting coaches reaching out to you and, schools wanted to have you come on visits and stuff.
It was crazy, especially for a kid growing up. I grew up going to Boise State games before Boise State was.
Back when there was 500 people in the stands. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I remember going with my dad to the first ever blue turf game. So you kind of endured some rough years. Yep. It wasn't the Boise State that it is now. And so Boise State recruited me, but I wasn't really interested because it wasn't, they weren't what they were today. But yeah, I just had a dream to play and I didn't realize, I think, how good I was. And then I started getting these calls from all the USC and UCLA. And then when Bill Walsh went to Stanford, they started to recruit me. And so that was where I wanted to go. I kind of made up my decision early. It was interesting. I took a recruiting trip to Stanford. Tom Homo, who just retired at BYU, he was the secondary coach there. They had 3 or 4 Super Bowl champions on their staff, and Bill Walsh was the head coach. So who doesn't want to go there?
Yeah.
Went out there on a recruiting trip, sat across the table from Bill Walsh, and we were talking. I didn't, even though I was there on a trip, I still couldn't believe that I was getting recruited by them. And so I just asked him, I was like, hey, coach, like, if you guys were ever going to offer me a scholarship, when do you think, like, is that a possibility? And I think I was a pretty high recruit. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And he said, well, how about right now? And I was just like, yeah, I shook on it. I'm coming for sure.
Wow.
So I was committed to Stanford early. And then I called BYU to cancel my trip. And they said, we want to just come on your trip. And they put on kind of the full court press. LaBelle came out, to my house in Nampa, which was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And we had like a news crew at my house. And eventually, I made a decision to switch over and go to BYU.
What was it about BYU that made you want to go there?
I think some of it was when I came home and told my mom that I was going to Stanford, she kind of cried. She wanted me to go to BYU.
Yeah.
I think she thought that would be better for me just as a person. I had a lot of family in that area. It was a little bit closer. And, really the chance to play for LaBelle Edwards. I mean, Bill Walsh is a legend. LaBelle Edwards is a legend.
Yeah.
But there was something about him, the way he built relationships with the players. And he just had a knack for that. And I think it kind of drew me in.
No, that's awesome.
And also, they were going to let me play running back. And
okay.
Stanford recruited me to play defense, which I didn't want to play. I wanted to play running back.
Okay. So they're like, yeah, whatever. Like offense, defense, both ways. Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah,
and so
I went out there and played as a true freshman as a running back.
Okay.
And that kind of launched my.
So what? So you graduate from high school. Did you immediately go down to BYU?
Yeah.
What did that whole kind of time period look like?
BYU as a true freshman, enrolled, and was kind of I got a ton of playing time as a freshman, playing running back. I was playing running back and a lot of special teams play, and just it was pretty amazing.
So they put you right into the rotation right away. You start, getting snaps.
Yeah.
So you're in. And then when did the transition to defense kind of take place? And then were you happy about that, or was that something that you were?
Yeah. So, they had talked to me about it a bunch of times, several times, and I was super resistant. I was like, no, I'm not moving to defense. Like I want to stay on offense. about halfway through my freshman year, LaBelle comes cruising up to me in his little golf cart. It was great. He had this little golf cart that he cruised around. And he kind of waved me over, and then I got in the golf cart with him. And I never forget this conversation. He was super calm and just basically made a statement of fact. He said, Rob, if you stay at linebacker, or I'm sorry, if you stay at running back, if you stay on offense, you can be a really good college football player. You'll be a good college running back. But if you switch to linebacker, you'll play on Sundays. And that was the last practice I ever practiced as a running back. The next day I was with the linebackers. The rest is history. So, and that was because he had built such a good, strong relationship and so much trust with the players. And so even though I didn't want to do it, you know, I was like, okay, this guy knows, I trust him, I'll do it, and I'll just follow him.
Awesome.
And that's how I became a linebacker.
So, 2-time All-American at BYU, first-round draft pick by the Indianapolis Colts. I think it was 28th overall. Is that what it was?
Yes.
So, in the 2000 NFL draft. Talk to us about that. Like, what was that like? I mean, obviously being an All-American is a huge deal, huge honor. Yeah, like that's a big deal.
So far out of what I had ever expected as a kid. As a matter of fact, I remember a conversation. So my freshman roommate at BYU was John Tate.
Okay.
He was a 14th overall pick. Went to play for the Chiefs and the Bears. We played against each other in the Super Bowl. He was my best buddy. And I remember a conversation with him, or like our freshman, sophomore years, where we're just like, dude, if we can just somehow get on an NFL team and play special teams, like, you know, we could buy a nice leather jacket and a screen TV.
Yeah.
You know, that was where our mind
living in Hillman Halls or Deseret Towers or something.
But as you start to get more accolades and you start to think, wow, man, I might get drafted. And then pretty soon it's like, I might get drafted in the first round. And then when it actually happens, it's just, it's like the highest of highs in your life. It was pretty amazing experience.
So having an opportunity, and I'm sure some of this will flow into the NFL, having an opportunity to play at such a high level, you see people all across the spectrum, right? Like you see some guys that don't have as much talent, but they work really, really hard. They're really, really smart, right? They understand the game. They understand the scheme. They understand what they're trying to do. There's other guys that are immensely talented, but aren't very diligent. They aren't very hardworking. They're not as dialed in. You know, you see people all across that spectrum. What did you notice? What were the patterns that you saw? And was that something that you felt like you were able to incorporate into what you did in the preparation and maximizing the natural gifts and abilities that you already had? But does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And you know, I'll just be super, super blunt and honest here. That's a regret that I have. I wish I understood more the need to prepare and the importance of preparation. I think I learned that a bit late in my career. By the time I was really smart about football and started to understand it and how to study, by that time I was kind of older into my career. And fortunately, you know, I had this little career resurrection. But you see the guys that, look, the NFL is a little different from college. Like, you're not going to get to the NFL just by just hard work alone. You know, you got to have, these are the best of the best.
Yeah.
These are insanely talented guys. But the best of the best, those are the guys that combine the two, the hard work, the preparation, you know, the knowledge of the game, understanding the concepts, along with their physical skills. And I think early on, I just relied on my physical skills. And then when those started to kind of wear out a little bit, I had some pretty severe injuries. That's when I started to realize, you know, I can stay in this game by being smarter than the other guys, by understanding the defense, by being able to help other guys. And so it was a bit of a process for me that honestly I wish I had picked up on a little bit earlier. But that was, you know, you do have some guys in the NFL that are they're just freaks.
Yeah.
You're just like, how is he doing this kind of stuff? That was a bit of a shock to me. I got to the NFL and I'd always been the very best. I always felt like I was the best. And I remember walking into that locker room and my locker was next to Cornelius Bennett, played all those years for the Bills.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame or not, but he should be.
Yeah.
And you know, a couple lockers down is Peyton Manning and there's Marvin Harrison. and you're just like, wait, what have I gotten myself in? Like, I don't know if I can play with these guys.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of a shock for me to get to that level.
So what were some of the changes that you noticed in going from college to the NFL in that level of preparation? Obviously, you're not a student athlete anymore. You're a professional athlete. Like, this is your job, and that's what you do. What was different about that for you in the preparation and the demand, on your body and on your life that took?
Yeah, it was really, Cam, it was interesting because I really got to be NFL just on raw talent. I didn't know football inside and out like I thought I did. I mean, I got to be NFL and they were start throwing out these terminology that everyone else knew. And I'm like when I was a rookie, I'm embarrassed to say this, I didn't really know that cover 2 meant 2 deep safety. I'm like, a first round draft pick will be to be the starting middle linebacker.
Yeah.
So in some respects, I was starting from scratch with the terminology stuff. I had never needed it. I always knew what my role was, and I knew how to do that, but I didn't understand that in the greater context of the scheme.
Okay.
When I started to learn that, and I started to be like, okay, I need to do this because this is what the D lineman is doing, and that was one level. And then when I thought, okay, I'm doing this because this is what the D lineman doing, this is what the corner's doing, and this is what the weak safety's doing.
Yep.
When you start to get the concepts of the defense, it comes together. And I think that's life too. And I think it's probably business. I'm not much of a business,
100%.
but I'm guessing in your world, when you start to understand the bigger factors that are in play and all the forces that are coming into it, that's when you can really start to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. How can I positively impact other people?
Yeah.
And by understanding what their role is and what they're trying to accomplish, I can better fulfill other people's needs by understanding what their needs are, right? And so just like understanding, okay, how do I help in this cover 2? These 2 safeties are dropping deep. Hey, I got to run in the middle of the field and, run to the pole, they say. I've got to run to the pole and protect kind of that deep, soft middle, the 4 guys underneath, but I've got a particular role in this scheme or whatever we have going on. And, same is so true, in life, it's true in business. And so, no, I think that's a great analogy. So talk about your time in Indianapolis. I'm getting to play for Tony Dungy, Peyton Manning's there. Obviously, Peyton is most well known, I think, for his level of preparation. I think obviously Peyton's a big guy and had strong arm. His dad, was a great player in the NFL, but Peyton Manning is legendary for his preparation and for how well he understood defenses. He and Tom Brady both kind of the same vein, and obviously getting to play against guys like Tom Brady too. Like, talk about that experience.
Yeah, it was insane to get there. And, I think the thing that people don't realize about Peyton was a guy that has that kind of success. There was so much preparation in the field, and in the classroom, film work, but he was just all about winning and doing whatever it takes. He was one of the first guys that reached out to me when I got drafted, took me to lunch. I don't think it was because he wanted to be buddies.
Yeah.
I think it's because he saw me as an asset that
Yeah.
they could help the team win.
Yeah. Hey, if we're spending a first round draft pick on you, we better make sure that you can play and that you're going to contribute. And
And so he would do little things like that. He would have Christmas parties every year at his house, but it wasn't just the players. It was the players, the general manager, the coaches, the janitor, the secretary, the guys that worked on the field, because he saw that everyone in that organization mattered. That was what was truly impressive about the Colts organization is from top down, there was respect. I mean, our custodian, Wade, he was beloved by the players, and he was as much a part of our success as anybody else because, he took care of the facilities that we had to be at every day. And so, getting into the NFL, a big difference was you realize, okay, this is a job. They're paying me a lot of money to do this, and the expectations are really high. So you get drafted and they kind of fire the bullet.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of when it catches up to you. And so you're constantly trying to stay ahead of that bullet. And I played for Jim Mora for a couple of years, and that was a interesting experience. I don't know if you remember the whole Playoffs?
Oh yeah. Talk to us about
I
that.
was in the locker room. That was my second season. My first season, I had a pretty catastrophic knee injury and I missed half the year. Second season, I came back and played well and led the team in tackles, but Edgerrin got hurt. We had some other injuries, and we ended up 6-10 that year. It was the only losing season I ever had in my life, and you could kind of see the wheels falling off. And then Coach Mora got fired, and then that's when they brought Tony Dungy in, and that was really interesting to see.
Yeah, changes in leadership. What did you notice from that? What were some of the things that you took away from their ways of doing things?
Yeah, Jim was kind of more of like the I don't say it in a bad way, but kind of the military style. It was pretty by the book, and Tony was really more of a kind of a principle-based leader. He didn't yell, he didn't curse. It was like, these are the expectations, they were set. If you can't live up to this standard, we'll just remove you from the football club. I'm not going to yell at you, scream. And I think I think a lot of guys appreciated that style of leadership because that's the type of leader that you want to play for.
Yeah.
There are some leaders that you're afraid, and so you do it.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you can win football games like that. I just don't know how long you can do it.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Yeah.
And Tony's style was more principled, and so you didn't want to let him down. You wanted to play hard for this guy.
Well, I think that people see him on ESPN and you see him in his, analyst role. He seems very soft-spoken, very, kind and maybe, like you said, principle-based, where, he's not doing the Stephen A. Smith thing or whatever, where he's like yelling and criticizing someone and calling them names and all those things. Like his demeanor is always very calm, very stoic, very, just kind of like matter of fact, like you kind of mentioned. So he was that same way as a coach.
Yeah, exactly the same way as a coach. And a guy like that, it was, I have been yelled at a lot in my life as a football player. Like if you play long enough, you get yelled at.
Yeah.
Especially my first 2 years. But when you play for a guy like Tony, like your mission is to never he didn't really yell at people, but you wouldn't want that. Like you wouldn't want to let him down. He could just give you a sideways glance and you'd be like, oh no, I can't make that mistake again. And the few times I did kind of hear him raise his voice, it perked up everybody. I remember, I'll just share a quick story. I remember the first training camp we had in Terre Haute, Indiana. It was our first time as a team together with Coach Dungy. And he walked into the room and he walked up to the main podium up front. And, guys are kind of talking and jabbering. And typically, a coach would go up there and be like, okay, quiet down. Tony just stood up there and he just stood there and he just waited. And it took, 20, 30 seconds. Some guys were kind of talking and then it kind of slowly got quiet down. And then he just simply said, okay, this is how I'm not going to come up here and tell you guys to, when the clock ticks, whatever time it is, that's when the meeting starts and I'm going to start talking. And from that point on, the rest of my career, that's just how it was. There was when he got up there, it just stopped. So he didn't need to constantly remind guys, right? He set the example and he set the tone and then it stuck. And he was a pretty amazing guy.
I love that.
Yeah.
Principle-based leadership is a powerful thing, right? Like the idea that an organization takes on the personality of its leader.
100%.
And when you have a leader that acts a certain way, when they carry themselves a certain way, whether that's good or bad, that's going to have ramifications all the way through the organization. We have our podcast is primarily focused toward younger people that are coming up in their career. Maybe they already own businesses, maybe they're buying a business, maybe they're in college, maybe they're debating about what they want to do in their career. But I think that we all have examples in our life of leaders that we didn't love playing for, working for, growing up with, whether that's like a parent or someone else in your life. But having those type of leaders, like you just mentioned with Coach Dungy, that make you not want to disappoint them, right? Like where you respect them so much and you care about them and you know that they care about you, where you want to perform because of that. You perform because of your respect you have for that person.
Yeah, I bet. I don't know. I won't speak for you, Cam. You can answer this, but for me, the leaders that I valued the most, what I remember about them wasn't X's and O's of football that I learned. It wasn't techniques that I learned, and I'm guessing it's for you. It's maybe not the business stuff. It was the values it was the personal relationships that they built.
Yeah.
And I think you hear a lot of lip service about, people, it's people first, but then you have leaders that don't develop those relationships. And that was what Lavelle was. There were sometimes he let his coaches coach. Sometimes I was like, does he know all the plays? But for him, it was the most important thing was relationships. And, you can win football games by having good relationships. You can win in business by developing good relationships. Obviously, that's not it.
100%. Yeah.
But yeah, so I always thought that was interesting that the coaches, the people that I had in my life, it wasn't necessarily the tactical stuff that they taught me that I remembered. It was more the principle.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff.
No, I love that. And I think that as a parent, to me, the most important role you'll ever have in life is being a father or a mother. And as a parent, wanting to be that kind of parent where your kids look at you that way, right? Like I tell people all the time, like success to me is I want my kids to think that I was a good dad.
Yeah.
I want my kids to want to come back home once they're out of the house. I want them to want to have a relationship with me when they're adults and they don't have to, right? They have friends, they have all these other demands in their life. And do they want to have a relationship with me? And that impetus falls on me. It doesn't fall on them, right? Like they didn't choose to be born. I chose to have kids. And so wanting to have that relationship with them where they want to be with me and, I'm where they choose to want to spend their time as they grow up. And I think that having that type of leadership, being that type of a person, and it's hard, right? Like it's not, every person is emotional. Every person has, thoughts and feelings and frustrations and cares and worries, but overcoming those things, it's easy to make the right decision when things are easy, but life is rarely easy. Like we all have adversity that we have to go through. We all have obstacles we have to go through. We all have demands that come on our time. And so it becomes easy to be impatient, especially with the people that mean the most to us, right? It's easy to take those people most for granted or to let them down or to, speak to them in a way that you wouldn't speak to other people, and to become disciplined enough to where you care most about what those closest to you think and feel. And so that's kind of a personal mission and goal in life of mine, is to want to be that way. And then I think just as you described, like it carries over, right? The type of leader and the type of person that you are carries over into your professional life, carries over into everything else that you have going on. And so, finding good leaders, good mentors has a profound impact on your life. I mean, you had a few great examples. Sounds like Lavelle Edwards was obviously one of those for you. Coach Dungy was one of those for you. Getting to, see and learn from high-level mentors. Obviously, they're getting paid a lot of money because they're really good at what they do and they're good at getting, outcomes. But maybe talk for a minute about the role of mentors and what that's had and meant in your life, and how you feel like that's helped you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all the things that you just mentioned, Cam, but I'll also, the flip side of the coin, and I think some of my greatest struggles that I've experienced in life have been because I didn't have enough mentors. And, whether that's my fault for not putting myself out there or just not finding the right people, I think that having those sort of, the kind of light, the guiding lights in your life is really critical.
Yeah.
And especially for young people, I think we live in a time where it's increasingly difficult for young men. They're struggling a lot right now. Men, I'm struggling. We're all struggling, I think. And I think some of that is because we're so busy and we're so caught up in the world and in our devices and in technology and in ourselves that we don't have the time or the energy, I think, to mentor or to find mentors.
Well, I think it can become really easy when so much of your identity, and I don't want to speak for you, but I could see very easily how so much of your identity is wrapped up in, hey, you're this amazing football player, you have all these accolades, you have all these scholarship offers, you get drafted in the NFL, like it's a macho, masculine, type of persona and almost personal identity that can easily grow out of that. And is men, like we've been told that, oh, hey, you can't be weak, right? Like admitting failure, admitting struggles, or that you're working through things, or that you're, having hardships, or that you feel pain, that shows weakness. And as men, like we're taught, oh, you can't be weak, you can't show weakness, you can't do any of those things, which I think is a really unhealthy thing. I think that understanding that we're all human beings, we all have struggles, we all have difficulties, we all have, some sort of a different forms of wounds that we had from growing up with needs that, were not met, and consequences of things that came from that, but also just the struggles and the demands of trying to be the best at whatever you're trying to do, right? Like whether that's in business or whether that's in playing, professional sports, that there's this demand to be the very best. And if you're not the very best, like very quickly it's over, right? Like if you're not the best high school football player, like you just don't get opportunities to go any further. If you're not one of the best college football players, guess what? Like you don't get an opportunity to go to the NFL, and NFL, is often referred to as a meritocracy, right? Like you can be an all-pro one year, and then within a year, your career can be over because, okay, hey, we don't need you anymore, right? Like there's a whole draft full of great players coming out every single year. And whether that's through injuries or other things that happen in life, like your career can be over. And so I think that demand of having to be the best all the time is very taxing, right? And it's often not talked about.
Well, and yeah, 100%. Yes, amen to everything you just said. And for me, especially, it played out in a really difficult way. I think what people don't realize is when you make it to that level in the NFL, you've typically been doing it since you were just little, bitty, and it really starts to become your identity. Yep. And so for me, it was everything of who I was. I'll just give you kind of a quick story. I had started much of my career, and I had a couple surgeries, knee surgeries, some pretty rough injuries. But by the time I was in my 7th year, I was a backup middle linebacker, and I was playing mostly special teams. And there's always a younger, cheaper, faster model out there. And so, but I embraced this role. And it was the year we won the Super Bowl. We started off really fast, but then we had this really devastating loss. We just got crushed. And the following week, I got switched from backup middle linebacker to starting strong side linebacker, a position I've never played in my life, right? So I adapted well, learned the position. I had 4 days to learn it. We had a Monday Night Football game. And I played well. We won this epic playoff run, won the Super Bowl, and I got a new 3-year contract extension. And it was sort of like redemption for everything that, it was like my identity was back. I was back on top again. Then came back the following season, and in week 4, blew my knee out, carted off the field, career over. Never made it back. And within, a year of retiring, I was in a psychiatric hospital. I was in and out of rehab. My marriage was falling apart. My whole identity had just collapsed. And I think a couple of reasons. One, I didn't have any other identity. I hadn't cultivated that. You hear about it, like, what are you going to do after football? What's your plan? It was like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
That's for everybody else. That's not for me.
This is what I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only that. It's like, no, this was what I was put here for. This is why I'm on the planet, to play football. Like, there's not anything else. I don't want there to be anything else. And then I didn't have a ton of mentors. I didn't have a ton of people that I could rely on. And I tried to go it alone. And, it cost me dearly. I think even to this day, I'm 50 years old now, still in some respects trying to figure out who the heck am I outside of football. And it's a real struggle. So I think that would be an emphasis that, to make to young people. It's like to figure out, it's never too early to start thinking about the different facets of your life and who do I want to be when this goes away? Because it will go away. You just don't realize that when you're 27, 28. It feels like it's going to go on forever.
Well, and we talk about that all the time with our kids, that we want to make sure that they understand that they're a person with inherent worth and value outside of whatever it is they do, right? You may get really good grades in school and all the teachers may call you really smart and they may say, oh, wow, you're so talented. You're so amazing in this, or maybe it's music, or maybe it's dance or sports or whatever it is. But like you said, eventually all those things are going to come to an end and you have to have an identity outside of those things. And so, we kind of use the term trying to be well-rounded, of having other things that you do and having time that just makes you you, and being part of our family gives you an identity of part of who you are and that you're loved and you're valued. Because I think if parents aren't intentional about that, it can very easily become a really difficult thing that their kids may never get over, right? Like I use the example with people. I remember going to a dance recital. This is probably 10 years ago. And the dance teacher gets up and all these girls are like graduating, right? So it's like their senior year of high school. And so it's like their last performance recital. And the teacher pulls them up one by one and just, holds them and starts crying. I mean, like, I remember this little girl coming up here when she was 2 years old, walking into the studio, and this was just her happy place. And I've coached her 5 nights a week for the last, 17, 18 years, whatever, 16 years, I guess, till she's 18 years old. And I've just loved this little girl. And she's been here with me every night, all this stuff, and just coached her and love her like she's my own daughter. And, I look over and the mom's bawling and the daughter's bawling and the dance teacher's bawling. And I think to myself, I'm like, what an absolute tragedy. What an absolute tragedy. Like, this little girl doesn't even know anything else. Never been exposed to anything else. She doesn't know whether she likes soccer. She doesn't know whether she likes music or theater or softball or anything else. She has no idea, because from the time she was so little, that's what she was put in, and that's the only thing she's ever done. And so we try to make it a point with our kids, and it's so hard in the world today where there's demands at such a young age to specialize in sports, and we can get into that, of kids only playing one sport and only having one thing. And it's like, if you're not careful, that can so easily become someone's identity. They only see themselves as a basketball player. They only see themselves as a soccer player. They only see themselves as a football player, a dancer, whatever it is. And I think that, as you said, like, it's going to come to an end for everyone at some point, whether that's at 14 years old or 18 years old or 22 or 27. At some point, it's going to come to an end. And then who are you after that? Like, what is your identity? What makes you who you are? And, do you feel like your life is worth living after that? And unfortunately, so many people, they don't have that, and their entire identity gets wrapped up. And then, it can be very difficult coming out of that. And it sounds like obviously you know that very well.
Yeah, that was, yes. I don't know it's hard to, you've said it really well. It's tough to, and I think what makes it difficult too, Ken, is that the world points you, I think, in that direction of
100%.
No, you'd have to be this. And
yep.
I think with social media and, I see that influence on my own kids. So, and sometimes it's not just your identity of who I am, but I think a lot in today's world with the youth, it's who I'm not. I'm not this. I'm not skinny. I'm not athletic. I'm not, and that becomes your identity of not having those. Honestly, in some respects, that's something I've struggled with is that, I often think that my gifts were just in this one thing. And I'm just like, I'm not a business nerd. I don't understand these concepts. I don't get financial, like those numbers and businesses, like I don't. And so it's really it's made me sometimes to act small. And it's really something I'm still working to get over, to realize, you know what? Everyone starts from zero. Cam didn't start with this business acumen. You got to learn, you got to figure out the little stuff.
Yeah.
That can be really hard when you've achieved something at the highest level. That's been one of the hardest things for me is you win a Super Bowl, you accomplish all your dreams in your early 30s. And then it feels like anything else is almost a failure. Like if you're not the CEO of a Fortune 500, you failed.
Yeah.
If you're not the best salesman, you failed. If you're not, and so it's kept me on the sidelines, I think, for too much of my life. And you realize as you get older, you're just like, it's not really about the achievements and the accolades, and it's just about finding meaning and finding purpose. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's not about finding meaning or finding purpose. It's about creating meaning and creating purpose.
Love that.
And I think sometimes I can sit behind my computer screen trying to figure out my future. What I need to be doing is be out in the world, living, leaning into fear. And some stuff is going to fail and some stuff is going to be successful. And that's how you do it. So I'm learning that in my wisdom of age, is that purpose and meaning, they're created.
Yeah.
That's something we find.
I love that. I agree with that. Well, and I think that if you start from a standpoint of how do I help other people, how do I take what gifts I have, what opportunities I have, what aptitudes I have, and how do I go use that to help other people, that the path just lights in front of you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, right? In fact, like, I kind of thought I wanted to do anything but this, right? Like, my intention, I remember coming out of high school, like, I had zero desire to have anything to do with my parents' business or, buying it from them or anything like that. I was like, that's the last thing I want to have anything to do with. Like, that's not in the cards for me. And I think that as you get in, and if you want to call it faith, that the path gets lit in front of you, right? Like, you make one step into the dark and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the path just sort of illuminates in front of you. And that there is ultimately a way to utilize the gifts and opportunities and aptitudes that you have to be able to do something that can help benefit other people, that you bring value to the world, that you find fulfillment and meaning in, that, provides more financial opportunities than you would ever know what to do with. Those sorts of things just come, but it doesn't come when you're trying to be what someone else thinks you should be. It doesn't come when you're trying to do what you think other people should, be okay with, or what you should be doing. I found that people often are most miserable when they're living their life based on someone else's set of expectations, and they're happiest when they're living based on how do I help people and how do I use the gifts that God's given me to go and to use those to benefit other people. And then I just become an instrument in that. And then everything else kind of takes care of itself. And, like, it's taken me a long time to learn that, but that was part why I wanted to do this podcast. Was I hope that people listening can hear that. And I think that what you're communicating is really powerful, because whether you're, first round draft pick, NFL, Super Bowl champion, long time NFL career, that everyone at some point has to find meaning and purpose, and that life is going to throw all kinds of curveballs at you, and that things are going to change, and that you're going to have to reinvent yourself over and over and over again multiple times, and that's okay. Like, life is not linear. Life is not just, oh, hey, I had this decision and then this led to this, led to this, led to this, and it all just worked out so smoothly for me. We go through peaks and valleys. We go through hardships. We go through trials. We go through, lawsuits and failures and divorces and, painful things that happen. And like, those sorts of things happen to everyone. Death of loved ones, sicknesses, like injuries, like loss of a job, bankruptcy, like all those sorts of things happen. And then it's like, okay, then what comes next? Like, what did we learn from this? How do I take that? How do I pick up the pieces? And how do I go create beauty for ashes, so to speak, right? How do I go piece this vase back together and make it something even more beautiful? And I think that that's the whole point. I think that that's ultimately what God wants us to learn to do, is to understand that we're not in control, that things are going to happen. And as soon as we think, hey, I've got it all figured out, curveballs are going to come into life, and we're all going to have to learn how to pick up the pieces, so to speak, and then move on, reinvent yourself, become a new version of yourself, and move on and move forward.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of resilience, and I've gotten super interested in that. I had um, a really, well, I had this eye-opening moment where you start to realize that you can be a survivor. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's sort of like level one resilience. I talk about this a lot, resilience 1.0. The next level of resilience is when you start to adapt and you start to grow from stuff. And, just in the last 3 years, I had this crazy set of life circumstances where I was just getting the crap kicked out of me. I had left my job to pursue a master's in mental health counseling, and then I was struggling with some cognitive stuff from the head injuries, the concussions, dropped out of my master's program and was out, had to get a back surgery, had to replace my disc. And then I was rehabbing from that and I fell, tore tendons in my shoulder. That was a few months after the back surgery. Then about a month later, I was hiking, started having these weird pains in my throat and my chest, ignored them for a month, finally called the doctor. And within days of calling the doctor, I was getting double bypass open heart surgery. I mean, I'm 48 and healthy. I have kids.
Wow.
It was terrifying. And 6 months later, I'm down at Lake Powell with some friends to go wake surfing, kind of to celebrate that I'm still alive. And I ripped my hamstring tendon off of my pelvis. That was about 8 months ago. And I woke up to the fact that I'm gritty, I'm tough, I'm a survivor, and that's not making me happy. That's not bringing me joy. What I need to be is adaptable. And this is something that I talk a lot about, is that resilience it's like purpose. It's not something that you discover, but that comes to you. You got to go and build it.
Yeah.
So I was really good at overcoming big setbacks, but I couldn't handle like the daily setbacks of life. They would spin me out. And, I think that's kind of a lot of what you're talking about. Like going through stuff doesn't always make you resilient. It's got to be a purposeful attempt at doing challenges that make you grow.
Yeah.
If that's been I've been really interested in this concept of resilience as of late.
My mission president, his favorite quote he'd often say is that 10% of life is what happens to you and 90% is what you make of it.
Yeah, I think it's probably more like 1%, 99%.
Yeah, that's what you make of it, right? Like the fact that everyone's going to have hardship, everyone's going to have difficulty, bad things are going to happen to everyone, and what do you choose to go do with that, right? Like Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, say that the obstacle in the way ultimately becomes the way.
It is the way.
Right? Like the obstacle is the way. And so our path is literally going through those challenges that are in front of us, and that is what shapes us into who we are. I'm noticing your scar on your knee that you have here. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm about to get another matching one here. I've got a matching one on my right knee. But like, those physical scars show pain and trials, or, a surgery that you've had, something physical on the body. The mental scars, the emotional scars, those ones aren't often as visible, right? Like people have no idea about those kinds of things. If you would share with us, you alluded to your career ending with a knee surgery and having a knee injury and that ending your career, and then some of the things that followed that. If you don't mind, share with us the things that you learned from that, what that process looked like for you, and how you came out on the other side.
Yeah. Well, let's see. How can I say this in the most honest way? I think I'm still in the process of coming out on the other side. This knee injury, the sequence of events, it was nuts, because my career had kind of taken a lull and then it had just got resurrected, and I was getting accolades and I got a new contract, and then boom, it was over. And my whole life fell apart. Literally everything, my marriage, my career, my physical health. I had gained something like victim errors, not muscle. I didn't know how to deal with life. And then I encountered all these surgeries. This last hamstring surgery, 8-10 months ago, that was my 16th surgery. And I, in a lot of respects, I felt like I've been just hanging on. But you start to get to a point where that stops being enough, And I think my biggest takeaway, Cam, is that it's a skill. It's not just you can't just write on the wall. 10% of life is
what happens to you, and 9% of you.
Put that picture up there. That's not. You got to figure out. Okay, what does that mean? What goes into that? How do I learn to restructure my cognitive thinking? Cognitive reframing. How do I learn to expose myself to the right kind of challenges? How do I learn the ins and outs of an adversity so that I can have a diverse range of responses? These are the things I started to pick up when I was studying about resilience. Is like, you think about a forest. I read this one research paper. It was called the resiliency of the ecological systems. And it was about forests, and it was about how a forest has all these the healthy forests, they have different kinds of plants. So if a fire comes through, some of them burn quick, some of them burn slow, some of them grow back quick, some of them grow back slow. So a healthy forest isn't one where everything survives all the time.
Yeah.
It's one with a mix of responses. For me, I only had one response. And for a long time, that was to put some substance in my body, to not feel anymore. It took a long time to realize that, well, the hard thing about that is it works. It just doesn't work for very long until it starts to destroy your life. But the thing that I'm learning, that if I could tell my younger self, it would be, dude, when you're going through this stuff, you got to look at what's happening, and you got to try to learn lessons from it. You got to respond in different ways. Everything can't be like, okay, I'm going to meditate on this, or I'm going to talk to a therapist on this. But those are great things. They're awesome. But adversity is really complex because, the severity of it, the duration, your motivation, your support, it all impacts how you respond to it. So that's been my big takeaway. That's what I'm learning, is how to, survive long enough that you can find new ways to deal with things.
Yeah.
New partners to help you, friendships, relationships, different types of interventions. In businesses, you don't approach all business problems with one thing.
No.
And it takes years to learn those things. And so I think being patient with yourself, if I could say to my younger self, like, just relax, and as you go through these things, try out different things, become the mad scientist of your life. That's what I would have said. Say, Rob, stop trying to find the one answer and just become a mad scientist. And start throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Because what works for me, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for other friends and family. So, yeah, sorry, that was kind of long-winded. No way. Let's just say I think it's critical that we're patient with ourselves and that we try some different stuff. I try some. I even tried to write poetry one time. It was horrible. But it felt good just to try something different.
Yeah.
Exposure to cold, different kind of things.
Yeah, well, and I think that's such an important lesson for everyone to learn, of learning to be bad at things, or like learn to be bad at things, learn to do things that you're not the best at. I think one of the worst things we can do is to shelter young people, especially if you're good at this one thing, that's all that you ever do, right? Like, I'm a big advocate for kids playing multiple sports. I run a club football program, and I love football. I'm passionate about the lessons that it can teach, particularly young men, about how to be strong, how to be resilient, how to fight through injuries, how to do things you don't want to do, how to wake up early, how to be a teammate, how to, win, how to lose, how to go through hard things, how to practice when it's 100 degrees outside, and then be playing games in November when it's 0 degrees outside, right? Like all those sorts of things. You learn lessons that are applicable to your life through sports. I'm a huge believer in that. But at the same time, I'm a believer that it's really good for that kid who's the star quarterback on the football team and that gets all the accolades to go play baseball and to be the guy that's at the end of the lineup or sitting on the bench or having a fight for a spot to even get on the field, or to go play basketball and to be a role player, to be a guy that comes in off the bench or, barely makes the team, because all those things teach you different lessons. If the only thing you ever experience is, hey, I'm the star player, I'm the best at everything, and that's all I ever do, that can be a really difficult process, in life, when ultimately, like, you're not going to be the best at some point. Like, at some point, like, that's going to end, and it ends for everyone. What skills have you developed, and have you learned to foster those at a young age? Have you learned to deal with disappointment? Have you learned to deal with having to be a good teammate? Have you learned what it's like to be the guy that's at the end of the bench, right? Like, if you're the one that's, hey, I'm just a star player and I just make fun of all these other kids because I'm bigger and stronger and faster than everyone else is, like, at some point you're not going to be that. And so have you learned what it's like to sit in someone else's shoes, to be the guy that's sitting on the end of the bench being like, wow, like, this really sucks. Like, I don't like it when someone, like, all of a sudden making fun of other people isn't suddenly so fun anymore, right? Like, I think that all those kinds of things are important lessons for, young people in particular to learn, but that make a difference, growing up, in the type of teammate, person, spouse, friend, business partner that someone can be. All those things, help teach important lessons. And so I'm an advocate. I love sports, but I'm an advocate for kids getting exposed to a lot of different things and learning to be in all those different roles.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think it's massive. And I think this goes back to our earlier conversation about mentorship. And I'd be curious to hear your feedback. I don't think sports inherently will teach those lessons. These kids need to be taught and help and to understand them. And I think that was part of my struggle, as I was going through these things and I didn't really realize it. And so I think that's why mentorship and coaching and, being a parenting, is critical, because you can you can help guide and help them see, look, there's a lesson to be learned in here. I think too often
more.
people will send their kids off to sports thinking, well, they can learn it here.
Yeah.
But they need that help, which is why it's so cool that you developed this program and, these club teams and that you're interested in actually teaching these lessons.
Well, I thank you. That means a lot to me, because there are people doing the exact same thing, that their intentions are exactly the opposite, right? It's, hey, let's go find and recruit the biggest, strongest, fastest kids that look like they're 14 and they're 8 or 9, right? Yeah.
I haven't grown since I was so.
And let's go put all those kids on a team together, and then, talk about what a great coach I am, and I got this great team, and these things, and like, this is the best team to be on, and we're going to go do this, we're going to go win that. And I've just seen it time and time and time again where parents fall for it, right? Like, parents fall for this lie, this fallacy, that by a kid being on a team, that they're going to learn these lessons. And advice that I would give to any parent that's listening, or anyone that's going to be a parent, is you put your kids on teams because of a coach, not because of a team, right? Not because of their friends are on it, not because, oh, hey, they've won a bunch in the past, not because, oh, hey, there's a bunch of other really good players on it, or this will get them exposure and they're going to, get a college scholarship, right? Like, maybe tangent for a second, but like the lie that, parents believing that their kid getting a college scholarship is, some sort of great value, and in 99% of cases, it's not, right? Like, they paid way more along the process to try to get their kid, some sort of, in most cases, some partial scholarship to some small school that doesn't give them a great education or opportunity. And it's almost as though parents start living vicariously through their kids, that, it's like what they want, right? They want to be able to go tell people, oh, my son's on a football scholarship, my son's, a basketball scholarship, my daughter's on a volleyball or softball scholarship, rather than what are the lessons my kid learned going through this. I put them with this mentor that helped teach them all these years and had this massive impact on my kid's life. Like, I don't care if my kids go in tournaments. I don't care if they get a medal at the end of the weekend or something like that. Like, it couldn't mean less to me.
Kind of the same way too.
Yeah.
People stay at companies because of leaders.
Yep. Yeah. Don't
they stick around.
Don't go somewhere for the company. Go somewhere for the leader.
I think bears that out pretty strongly. So I think it's critical to find those.
Yeah, 100%. We're running short on time. One thing that I did want to hit with you that even just, I guess, for me personally, we've been talking about adversity, we're talking about different things. And so I'm thinking about, you're talking about playing in the Super Bowl. I'm serving my mission. I'm in Southern California while this is happening. And, of course, obviously, you're not watching TV, you're not watching Super Bowl, things like that. So I'm just hearing about it. And so I remember my mom and dad writing me that week and saying that, oh, the Colts are playing the Bears in the Super Bowl, and Rob Morris plays for the Colts and all that kind of stuff. And maybe we should even talk about this. I grew up as a kid going to Nampa High football games, right? My dad went to Nampa High School. That's right. Like, I grew up as a kid going there, right? I remember getting in my snow clothes and freezing on like a November night and going there and sitting there eating a chorizo or whatever in the Bulldog Bowl, sitting there watching Rob Morris kick the ball. People tell stories, but you were the kicker too, right? Like, and that you'd kick the ball and go all the way through the uprights and be a touchback like every single time. And I remember being a kid sitting there watching that. And so I'm on my mission, and my mom writes me, or my dad, one of them, and says, oh yeah, the Colts are playing the Super Bowl. And obviously, like, I knew you were playing for the Colts. And yeah, so like I remember hearing about that. And so people coming up and talking to us like, oh, you guys watched the Super Bowl? And obviously, like, you hear pretty quick that, like, oh, the Colts had won. And I remember seeing, pictures of you from, whatever was like in the newspaper and stuff here. Cause obviously, like, it was a big deal. And so I remember hearing about that, but then later learning very first opening kickoff, right? Memorable NFL moment, right? Opening kickoff goes, all the flash bulbs go off. Devin Hester returns the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Talk to us like, that's in the context of football, but that's some adversity, right? Like, that's not something you're planning on happening right out of the gate, that you're down 7-0 before you've ever even stepped onto the field, right? Like, what was that like? And maybe talk about adversity in football and then adversity in life and how those two kind of parallel.
Yeah. Funny story. The whole week leading up to the Super Bowl, we practiced doing squib kicks, kind of these bouncy kicks. And I was on the kickoff team. I was the starting outside linebacker. I was on the punt team, the kickoff team. And I can remember a couple of us were getting frustrated, and we're like, come on, coach, just kick it till we got this. We'll stop it. Like, don't worry about it.
For those that don't know, Devin Hester is the only person in the NFL Hall of Fame as being a kick and punt returner, right? It's like he
was pretty good.
Yeah, probably the best of all time. Yeah.
But we had egos too,
Yeah.
So we're like, just kick it away. We practice all week these squib kicks. And then sure enough, the opening kickoff, we kick it away and he scores. And then we're like,
kicks it right to him. Like, kicks it right to him. Yeah.
Let's just squib it for the rest of the time. Yeah. So we realized we had made a mistake there. But, that whole playoff run was filled with adversity. This is something that, that I love to talk about too, that the first game against the Chiefs, we were the worst rushing defense in the league, and they had Larry Johnson, the second leading rusher. We held him to 32 yards, and then we play Baltimore and can't score a single offensive touchdown, but we kick 5 field goals to win. Then New England jumps out to a 21-6 halftime lead, a deficit that at the time, no one had ever come back from. And we have a backup D lineman catches a touchdown, and our center recovers a fumble in the end zone. We get an interception to beat Tom Brady to go to the Super Bowl, and then the Devin Hester thing and the rain, and we rush for almost 200 yards. So this is the essence of resilience, is having different responses to adversity. This was something that I've learned looking back on that season, is resilience is about finding a way. It's not always about the most talent or the most grit or determination. It's about figuring out, ways to win. And that's, I think, one of the keys to overcoming adversity, to dealing with adversity in life.
Well, sorry, I was going to say, I love that because, again, like this idea that life is not linear, where it wasn't just like, okay, hey, we have Peyton Manning, we have Marvin Harrison, right? We have, right, like we have Edgerrin James, like we have these guys, Dallas Clark, and Peyton throws for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns every game, and we were just better than everyone else, and so they just couldn't stop us, and we won, right? Like it's like a vanilla recipe, but it's like it doesn't happen like that, right? Everyone is so different, and that is life, right? Like that is life, that's business, that's how things go. That the answer to yesterday's problem is rarely going to be the same recipe as the answer to today's problem and the one you're going to have next week and next month and next year. That you have to learn how to become resilient. You have to learn how to, okay, like I was able to resolve this issue yesterday by doing my homework and doing my research and preparing for it. This issue I have to go resolve tomorrow is going to get resolved by a connection and a network and a friend and someone that I have that I can lean on. The connection or the problem I'm going to have 2 years from now is going to be completely different altogether, and therefore it's going to require me to be a different version of myself in order to do that. And I think what you're describing with that Super Bowl run is the same thing, right? It's like we had to be different each game to win and to overcome. It wasn't just a one-size-fits-all recipe.
Yeah, there's no fairy tale without the wolf,
Love it.
And sometimes that you learn that the hard way, but as you learn it, I think that's really the most critical thing to overcoming adversity. Is kind of what you said.
Yeah.
That's been my experience in sports and in life. Is that, like you said, you can only connect the dots looking backward. You can't connect them looking forward. And you gotta just, like you said, take that step out into the dark. It's been a really fascinating journey for me. I feel like I'm right in the middle of it, which is kind of cool to do podcasts or to do events where you're not really speaking as an expert. You're sort of speaking as a practitioner. And it's a little bit scary too, because you recognize, like, I don't know that I fully have this figured out, but it's kind of fun to be on the journey with other people that, like yourself, that are like-minded, that are interested in figuring stuff out, and living life and experiencing kind of the mysteries of what it's all about.
Oh, I love it. So Rob's here because he's been speaking at our VIP event tomorrow night, and so I'm excited to hear you there. For anyone, hopefully by the time you hear this, you'll have already been at our event. But we're excited to,
twice.
Yeah. But we're excited to have you. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you coming on the podcast, and this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I just was telling you, I just fired up on Instagram. It's
Yeah.
Rob Morris 2.0, and I have a website, robmorriscoaching.com.
Perfect.
About some of the stuff I'm doing.
We'll make sure that we link both of those in the podcast and in the clips that will come from this. And so that way people can be able to reach out to you, connect with you, ask you questions, hire you, whatever that looks like. So,
I love it.
okay. Appreciate you, Rob.
Thank you.